Hi everyone, welcome to Poisonous People. Today we're going to be looking at the definition of a cult. And this might seem like a very simple video to make, but it's not. And the reason might surprise you. In the field of cultic studies, there is no agreed upon definition of a cult. Researchers and experts and practitioners have been studying this for decades. In fact, there's an entire topic in the literature dedicated just to answering this one question. So in this video, I'm going to take a crack at it and I'm going to offer you my definition of a cult. And in order to help me out, I'm going to dust off my old master's thesis, which I wrote in April of 2002. So it'll be really interesting to see how my ideas hold up after 21 years. So let's look at the old definition that I wrote back in 2002. And that definition reads as follows. A cult is a destructive relationship or system in which one party exerts power over another party through undue influence, resulting in harm to the party being controlled. So that's the complete definition. What I want to do now is I want to break it down so that you can understand why I chose the specific language that I chose. So the first thing we're going to focus on in this definition is the word system. The reason I chose the word system is because a system is a whole comprised of several parts. But the thing about a system is that those parts exist in relationship to one another. I can remember being in grad school and not being satisfied with the term group or movement. And the main reason I didn't like either of those terms is because cults rely heavily. They count on relationship in order to function. And when you have a group or a movement, you don't necessarily need relationship present in order for a group to exist or a movement to happen. For example, if I say I need a group of volunteers to help me move this weekend, well, 10 people volunteer, we can say, well, that's a group of 10 volunteers. But that group of 10 people doesn't necessarily constitute relationship. So that's why the entire definition rests on the word system. Now that we have that covered, we're going to look at the next piece, and that word is a destructive system. So we want to make sure that we exclude any systems that are healthy. We don't want to be attaching the word cult to something that really doesn't deserve to be called a cult because A, it's healthy, or B, it's just neutral. It's not necessarily harmful. And that's why I am specifying that a cult is a destructive system. Now, how do we know that it's destructive as opposed to dysfunctional? There are certain things that are clearly dysfunctional, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's destructive. Well, that's where the second half of the definition comes into play. So let's look at that whole definition once again. A cult is a destructive system in which one party exerts power over another party through undue influence, resulting in harm to the party being controlled. Now that is still quite a bit, so we're going to break this down even further. And let's just start with the first part of that second half. A cult is a destructive system in which one party exerts power over another party. Now we can't end it there, right? Because I can think of plenty of systems where one party exerts power over another party. Take, for example, the family. In a family, it is normal for the parents to exert power and control over the children. That is how a family is supposed to function. But we haven't gone far enough. Now, there are healthy families where the parents are exerting control over the children, and there are dysfunctional families where the parents are exerting control over the children. So just because the family is dysfunctional, it doesn't make them destructive. So we need to go a step further in our definition. And this is where we get the next part of the definition. It's where one party exerts power over another party through undue influence. What is undue influence? Well, I made a video explaining undue influence because it's probably a new term for a lot of people. But undue influence is essentially about decision making. It's when one person convinces another person to make a decision that they normally wouldn't make. Another way of explaining it is that undue influence occurs whenever somebody chooses to do something that they ordinarily wouldn't do in the absence of the persuasion. So can we stop here? Can we say that's our definition of a cult? Well, no, because I can think of scenarios where one party is exerting power over another party through undue influence, and they are not destructive. So we need to make sure that the definition is destructive. Let's use the family again. In a healthy family, parents are always unduly influencing their children, right? If left to their own free will, children would never eat their vegetables. They would never brush their teeth. So it is up to the parents to exercise a little bit of that undue influence, a little bit of that decision making has to fall in the hands of the parents. That doesn't make this family a cult. So we need one more piece in order to call this system a cult and to separate it as destructive as opposed to dysfunctional. And that's where we get the final piece of our definition. A cult is a destructive system in which one party exerts power over another party through undue influence, resulting in harm to the party being controlled. In order for it to be a cult, according to my definition, actual harm has to take place. Now, this is where we can disagree. We can say that something is dysfunctional and over time it's harmful, right? If you stay at a dysfunctional workplace, we can say that this is harming your mental health. Or we could say it's harmful to you physically because it's putting you under a lot of stress. But remember, the end of this definition also can't exist by itself. The end of the definition is dependent on the rest of the definition. So just because you are in a dysfunctional workplace and just because your boss is, really rough and unfair and works you all hours without any empathy for you and your needs, that doesn't make it a cult. Remember, what makes it a cult is the undue influence, and the undue influence has to do with the decision making. Now, you might notice that this definition is not yet complete. There is something missing. Back in 2002, I originally called this a destructive relationship or system. But after 21 years, I would say if there's one change I would make to this definition, it would be to eliminate eliminate the word relationship. Why? Because the word system implies that relationship is present. So the word relationship is redundant. Now, overall, I would say I'm still pleased with this definition. But no definition is perfect. As I said at the beginning, people have been trying to pin down a definition of a cult for decades. So my definition isn't going to be the end of the discussion. There's always going to be more questions. And this is why in my master's thesis, I actually advocated that we reject the term definition altogether and instead opt for a diagnosis. And the idea that a cult should actually be diagnosed is the subject of our next video. I'm Jen Guerriero, and this is Poisonous People. Thanks for watching.